I never really liked group photos. Something about standing in line, shoulder-to-shoulder, eyes forced into smiles, made me feel like a placeholder. Still, used to show up when they asked, just to be counted. The message wasn't meant for me. It arrived in my inbox late in the evening, forwarded from Nora. She often sent me things she thought I'd missed, like job postings or obscure poems from college professors we once adored. This time it was a banner image, soft gold cursive overlaid on a photo of hydrangeas. Sunday brunch at Mom's. Dress nice. We're taking a family photo. Love, Lila. I read it 3 times, not because I didn't understand, but because I was looking for a line I had expected. Something like, "Can you bring the quiche again?" Grace. Or even just my name. There wasn't one. I clicked the image closed, then opened it again. There was no mistake. No one had asked me to come. The kitchen was quiet. My mug still held the faint ring of coffee from that morning, half-washed and forgotten beside the sink. I turned the handle on the faucet and waited for the water to run cold. It didn't help. I called the house phone. It rang 4 times before cutting off. Then the message came. "Grace, I think it's better if you don't come. Not everyone's ready. I hope you understand. No punctuation, no warmth." Lila had always known how to be exact in her vagueness. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, then set it face down on the counter. The old dish towel hung crooked over the oven handle. A corner of it had started to fray. I leaned against the edge of the counter, arms crossed. There were no tears, no rising heat in my throat, just something quiet unraveling at the seam. They were taking a family photo. Without me. When I was younger, maybe 10, I once stood at the edge of a group shot for a church picnic. I remember the woman behind the camera saying, "You in the back, can you step out just a bit? You're casting a shadow." I stepped out and no one told me to return. That memory surfaced now, uninvited like a scratch I couldn't quite reach. I didn't reply to Lila. I didn't call back. I just stood there, watching the slow dissolve of something I had never quite been able to name. Later that night, Nora texted again. "Did you see it? I figured you weren't included. Thought you should know." I typed out, "Thanks," then erased it. She meant well, but there was nothing to thank her for. She wasn't the one who left me out. I couldn't remember the last time someone in my family called me first. Most messages were forwarded. Most decisions already made. My name used to be on the list. Once when Dad was in the hospital, I was the one who stayed the night. Lila brought flowers the next morning and got a thank you card. I didn't mention it then. It felt small to point out. I looked over at the coat rack. My winter scarf still hung there from last season, threadbare at the edge, where I used to pull it too tightly around my neck. I sat at the table and picked up a pen, opened my calendar, wrote down Sunday and left it blank. There was a time I thought a mission was an accident, that maybe they assumed I was busy or didn't want to bother me. Now I knew it wasn't about oversight, it was preference. They were choosing who they wanted to show up in the photo, and I had become excess. When I was in high school, I once overheard Mom telling her friend Margaret that Lila photographed better. I remember the way she smiled when she said it, light and dismissive, as if she was naming a fact about the weather. I never asked her what she meant. I just started stepping out of the frame on my own. The phone buzzed once more. A message from Mom this time. "Let's not make things difficult. It's just one day. We're trying to keep things simple. That word had a way of cutting deeper than most insults, because it always meant without you, like the removal of a painting to declutter the wall. I turned off my phone. The radiator clicked faintly behind me. I reached for the mug beside the sink, washed it slowly, and dried it with the towel that now hung in loose threads. I folded it back neatly. There was nothing dramatic about the silence that followed. Just the understanding that I had finally heard what had been said quietly for years. I was not needed. And the picture would be fine without me. I used to think harmony was something you could earn like a quiet prize for good behavior. If I stayed soft around the edges, if I bent just right, maybe they'd let me stay in the frame. At Lila's graduation, Mom gave a toast. She called her our family's greatest light. The room clapped. I was sitting at the end of the table, too far for the photographer to bother with. No one asked me to move closer. When Lila applied for her fellowship, she called me at midnight, panicked about formatting. I stayed up fixing her application. She submitted it in the morning, barely glancing up as she left. That spring, I saw her name in the university newsletter under Excellence in Global Policy. There was a photo of her with her advisor. I printed it for Mom. It ended up framed in the living room beside her prom portrait. I once mailed them a photo from my own lab, standing beside the research poster I had spent 6 months on. I found it years later, tucked into a drawer with expired coupons. I never said anything. I just brought wine to family dinners, carried napkins to the table, drove Dad to radiation appointments when no one else wanted the morning shift. He used to close his eyes in the car, say nothing for the full 20 minutes. One day he opened them and said, "Lila's been so good through all this." No sarcasm, just a sentence like any other. At the funeral, the minister called her a pillar of strength. My name came once near the end. Something about logistics. People shook my hand and said, "You must be Lila's sister." I nodded. It was easier than correcting them. The things I did were always invisible once completed, like clean windows or folded laundry. The less they noticed, the better the job. When Lila bought a townhouse with too much mortgage, Mom called. "Lila's having a tough time." I told her you'd understand. I signed the guarantor form, didn't ask when I'd be repaid. 2 months later, I visited for the holidays. I was in the kitchen when Mom picked up the phone and said, "Grace helped, sure. But that's guilt. It's not the same as love. You know how she is." She didn't know I was within earshot. I still washed the dishes after dinner, wiped the counters, took home the pie no one wanted. Once I brought a man I was seeing. He was quiet, polite. At dinner, Lila leaned across the table. "So, how'd you land him? I didn't think you dated." No one laughed except him. A little. He never asked to come back. I told myself that every family had its shadows, that love looked different in different homes, that being overlooked was not the same as being unloved. On Lila's birthday, she threw a party at the house. I brought a cake from the bakery she used to like. I saw her carry it to the kitchen, set it beside a box from someone else. During dinner, she raised a glass. "To the people who truly know me." She didn't look my way. When Mom gave away the piano, she didn't tell me. I found out from Nora, who saw it listed on a local site. I called to ask gently. "We needed the space," Mom said. "You weren't using it, were you?" It was the same one I used to practice on after school. My name was carved into the underside of the bench, lightly, with a pencil. I doubt she ever noticed. Years before that, I painted her a landscape in oils. Blue hills, pale sky. I brought it home wrapped in craft paper. She took one look and said, "It doesn't really match the room." The room had no color. I kept showing up, not because I didn't know better, but because I thought one day they might see the shape I had tried to hold. I thought being good would earn me the warmth I'd been waiting for. Lila always did bring life to a room, Mom said once at dinner. I was sitting there too. She wasn't trying to be cruel. That's what made it harder. There was no great betrayal, just the slow weathering of absence, the soft scrape of chairs where I was never invited to sit. When I cleaned out the garage for Dad, I found boxes of old school projects, labelled carefully, Lila. 3rd grade Lila, piano recital, Lila, art camp, none of mine. I once asked Mom about it. You were never much for saving things. That was true, I suppose. You don't keep what no one wants to remember. The truth is, I did try. Over and over, in ways no one noticed. I held their expectations like fine china, careful not to let anything slip. But they never looked up from their plates, and somewhere along the line I stopped trying to be seen. Not out of spite, not even hurt. Just erosion. There's a kind of silence you learn to wear like clothing. Not dramatic, not bitter. Just tailored to the life you're given, and I wore it well. I've never cared much for birthdays, but I used to keep the cards. Not the ones with glitter or singing buttons, just the ones with handwriting. The loop of ink meant someone paused long enough to say something in their own words, at least once. One year, Mom mailed Lila a birthday card wrapped in pale blue tissue. Inside was a note, folded neatly, written in her slanted cursive. She had drawn a small heart in the corner. Mine came in the same envelope. A second card. Pre-printed. No message. Lila opened hers at the kitchen table, smiled, set it aside. I kept mine in the drawer for 3 days before dropping it into the recycling bin. It didn't feel like something worth keeping. When I was promoted to lead a project team, I told them over dinner. The table was full, Dad, Mom, Lila, Charles. I remember the way the silverware clinked against the plates, how no one looked up when I finished speaking. Dad poured himself more tea and said, Lila's always had a mind for leadership. Mom nodded. She just knows how to carry a room. Charles turned to Lila. You should be running that firm by now. No one asked what my project was about. I folded my napkin slowly, pressing the crease flat. The day my article was published, I printed 2 copies. One for my office, one for Mom. She held it by the corner, glanced at the heading. What exactly do you do again? Then, without waiting for an answer, you're not planning to do this forever, are you? It's so niche. You should think about something more. Settled. Maybe a program in education. She tucked it under the mail pile. I didn't bring it up again. At Lila's wedding, I wore a slate blue dress Nora helped me pick out. We stood near the back during photo. The photographer adjusted people's shoulders, shifted angles. When he reached our corner, he paused. Let's bring the immediate family in tight, he said, gesturing vaguely. I stepped back automatically. No one pulled me forward. Later, as the reception slowed, I watched from the edge of the floor while Lila danced with Dad. They both laughed when he stepped on her foot. He looked happier than I remembered seeing him in years. Mom was talking with guests. I heard her voice rise in that polished tone she used for public moments. We're so relieved Lila married well. It's a comfort knowing she's taken care of. Someone murmured something about me. Mom didn't miss a beat. Grace. Oh, she's always managed on her own. Very independent. I touched the bracelet on my wrist, the one I'd bought for myself that morning. Thin silver, a single charm, no inscription. That night, I returned to the hotel room and unpinned my hair slowly, strand by strand, as if loosening memory. When I was 12, I won an essay contest at school. They announced it over the loudspeaker. I brought the certificate home. Mom put it on the fridge for 2 days. Then it was gone, replaced by Lila's swim meet schedule. I found the certificate later in the junk drawer, bent at one corner. It was wedged under expired coupons and a flashlight that didn't work. No one threw it away. They just let it fade. In high school, I remember waiting for someone to notice when I came home with straight A's. There was no celebration, just a question at dinner. Have you thought about tutoring Lila in history? She's falling behind. I nodded. I always nodded. Once I told Lila I'd been accepted into a summer program. She looked at me chewing her gum. Cool. Are you still going to be around to feed the cat? I said yes. And I did. I used to think that being steady would earn me something. Trust. Respect. Some quiet kind of belonging. But steadiness isn't noticeable unless it breaks. When Nora gave me an old photo last fall, one from a camping trip in our teens, I studied the image for a long time. I was there, off to the side, half out of frame. My sweatshirt had a rip near the collar. I remembered sewing it in the car, trying to keep it from stretching further. Everyone else in the picture was smiling. I was holding the cooler. In the guest room at my parents' house, there's still a copy of Lila's college acceptance letter framed in a silver border. The frame used to be mine. I bought it with babysitting money for my art award in 9th grade. It disappeared from my room when I left for college. When I asked about it, Mom said, "You weren't really using it." I didn't argue. Even now, I don't think they ever meant to exclude me. It's easier to erase what doesn't shine loud enough to compete. They didn't need to push me out. They just needed to keep looking past me. There's a difference. And I've learned how to live inside that silence without begging it to name me. Some things don't fall apart with sound. They simply fade from the page like ink left too long in the sun. The email came on a Thursday afternoon. The kind of message that doesn't carry urgency, just precision. There was no subject line beyond a reference number. The signature was neat, the tone distant. The transfer of shares in Whitmore Heritage Farm will proceed in accordance with Henry Whitmore's final wishes equally between Martha Whitmore and Lila Whitmore. Kindly confirm a mailing address for delivery of formal documents. I read it twice then, once more. My name wasn't there. Not omitted exactly. Just not present. Like it never belonged. The hallway outside the clinic was quiet, polished tiles, reflecting the soft flicker of overhead lights. I stood still, phone in hand until the screen dimmed itself. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it. There's a drawer in my apartment that holds old papers I never knew where else to put. I opened it that night and pulled out a copy of the guarantor form, Lila's name typed neatly at the top, mine signed in blue at the bottom. She had never brought it up again. Neither had I. The paper had curled slightly at the edges. When I called the house, Mom's voice came through too quickly, too evenly. That decision was made long ago. Your father thought you were settled elsewhere. I didn't ask what elsewhere meant. I didn't remind her that I had spent 4 summers entering harvest records, organizing invoices, balancing books that no one else wanted to touch. She exhaled sharply as if preparing a kindness. You've built a life of your own, Grace. You're not exactly involved. I looked around the room at the chipped enamel lamp, the heating unit that clicked twice before going silent again. I hadn't replaced it yet. The couch still had the same coffee stain from last winter, faint but familiar. I had pressed a napkin over it when it happened, not because I thought it would disappear, but because I didn't want it to spread. That night I didn't cook. I boiled water, poured it over the last of the chamomile, and let it sit. The mug had a small crack at the base, thin as a hairline. When I was 11, I spent a week cataloguing apple yields by hand because Dad didn't trust the new software. I wrote every number twice to be sure. At the end of the week, he patted my shoulder. "You're a good helper." At 16, I reorganized the storage barn without being asked. It took 2 weekends. Lila visited once stayed long enough to post a photo of herself leaning on a rake. She captioned it, "Farm Girl Life." Sort of. It got 211 likes. When she started dating Charles, Mom set a place for him at every holiday meal. His favorite dessert became part of the rotation before I'd learned his last name. That first Christmas, she bought him monogrammed towels. The same year, she gave me a candle shaped like a pine cone. I never lit it. Last spring, Lila hosted a dinner. The guest list included family, friends, donors. She asked me to review the contract for the event space. Quietly. No credit needed. At the end of the night, someone clinked a glass and toasted the women behind the brand. Mom smiled. Lila stood to wave. I stayed seated. There's a shelf at the back of the family office. A row of binders with years labelled in gold ink. I used to keep those records tabbed by quarter, marked with sticky notes. My handwriting used to be there. When I stopped helping, no one asked why. They just replaced the tabs. Mom once told a neighbour that I never had the mind for business. She smiled while saying it. Not cruel, just certain. It's better she stayed in healthcare. Grace is more clerical. The word landed softly, like dust. After the call, I sat with the email open again. The document had an attachment, a form to waive any claims or objections. I clicked on it, read the lines carefully. I didn't need to read them at all. The message was already clear. I hadn't lost anything. I had simply been overwritten. A week before Dad died, I visited the farm alone. The wind had knocked over one of the back signs. I hammered it in again without thinking. As I turned to leave, he had looked at me from the porch. "You always do what needs doing." Quietly. "I never had to worry about you." I wanted to ask if that's why it was so easy to forget me, but I didn't. Some part of me had always believed that being useful was the same as being seen, that if I kept showing up, they'd eventually draw a wider circle. Instead, they moved the boundaries without telling me. The paper from the lawyer still sat on my desk the next morning. I placed it beside the guarantor form, aligning the corners. The edge of one page had started to lift, curling upward, like a page trying to turn itself. I pressed it flat with my hand and left it there. I never imagined that leaving would feel this still. There was no argument, no slammed door, only a click when the latch caught soft enough that I wasn't sure it had even closed. I tested it once with my fingertips. It held. I didn't go to the memorial service for my grandfather. There was a group photo afterward. Nora showed it to me out of habit, forgetting herself for a moment. Everyone was arranged in tiers, black coats, familiar smiles. Lila wore pearls. Mom had her hand on Charles's arm. My name wasn't mentioned in the caption. I didn't ask for it to be. The frame above my desk held a photo of that same living room taken 10 years ago. Christmas morning. Wrapping paper on the floor, half-drunk mugs on the table. I was in the corner holding a book I never finished. I took it down, slid the backing loose, and set the picture aside. The frame made a hollow sound when I placed it in the box. The walls looked better without it. I packed 3 shirts, a pair of jeans, 2 sweaters I didn't mind folding tight. The green one had a loose thread on the sleeve. I tugged it at once, then let it curl. There was comfort in its imperfection. a small thing that belonged only to me. The coffee maker went in next, wrapped in a dish towel. It was a gift from Nora, the kind that came with no note, just a small smile and a, "You're allowed nice things, Grace." I'd never bought myself anything that expensive before. I still used the paper filter cone when I was alone. The lamp followed, small, with a burnished brass base and a linen shade. The light it cast was uneven, gentle. I found the notepad Mom used to leave grocery reminders on. One page remained half-torn eggs. Milk. Don't forget Lila's dress for dry cleaning. No mention of anything I had asked for. I folded it, not out of sentiment, but to keep it from drifting loose in the drawer. I left it behind. The email I wrote was brief. 2 lines. I need some quiet. Please don't reach out unless it's urgent. Grace. I didn't reread it before sending. Nora helped with the boxes. She didn't ask where I was going or why. She just folded the sleeves carefully, tucking corners under like she was wrapping something fragile. When we reached the last box, she paused. "You don't owe them anything." I didn't reply. We drove in silence. Rain tapped gently on the windshield. The kind of rain that doesn't announce itself, just lingers soft and unresolved. Outside the passenger window, I saw the house one last time. The shutters had been replaced last spring. White, perfectly matched. The same ones I had painted by hand when I was 16, standing on a ladder for hours, staining my cuffs with navy blue. No trace of that now. There was a red tulip blooming beside the walkway. The bulb had been planted wrong years ago and came up sideways every April. I used to straighten it. This year, it leaned into the path like it had given up asking for space. No one waved from the porch. No one had known I was coming or going. Inside the car, my breath fogged the window slightly. I traced a line through it without thinking. Nora pulled onto the main road. The streetlights were just beginning to hum. One flickered behind us, then held steady. I didn't look back. The apartment I moved into didn't have much. A narrow kitchen, a slanted ceiling in the bedroom. The wallpaper in the hallway peeled slightly at the edges, but the floor didn't creak when I walked across it. I didn't have to soften my steps for anyone else. I unpacked slowly. The books went on the shelf in no particular order. I left gaps between them, not because I ran out, but because I liked the spaces. The first night I ate crackers and cheese on the floor, sitting on a folded blanket. I drank water from a mug that still had the sticker on the bottom. I didn't peel it off. I didn't play music. I didn't turn on the TV. I just listened to the way the building breathed, pipes, shifting wood, settling. Even the silence had shape here. The next morning, I opened my inbox. There was one unread message from Lila. "Mom says you're being dramatic." I told her it's probably hormones. Maybe try journaling instead of disappearing. There was no greeting. No name at the end. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then I powered it off. The last thing I unpacked was the lamp. I placed it on the windowsill, even though the cord didn't reach. It didn't matter. I liked how it looked there, useless but steady. That night, I didn't write a list, didn't make a plan. I let the light fall across the floor without correcting it. I had always been the one to adjust. Now I let the light fall wherever it chose. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, it just feels undecorated. The floor creaks softly under my steps. Not enough to startle, just enough to remind me I'm here. I don't rush to fix it. The wood holds its own memory. I place the desk near the window because the light there doesn't demand anything. Morning sits gently on the sill. There's a draft that slips in through the edges, barely noticeable unless I hold still. The walls are blank. not waiting to be filled, just bare. I bought a basil plant from a corner vendor on the walk home. The woman wrapped it in brown paper. No small talk, just a nod when I paid in cash. The pot is chipped on one side. I didn't turn it to hide the flaw. It sits in the corner now, slightly tilted toward the sun. Nora found the map at a flea market. Faded borders, places that no longer exist. Countries renamed. The edges are curled, the paper thinning near the Atlantic. I pinned it above the desk without a frame. Some things don't need glass between them and air. I haven't put up any photo, not because I don't have any, but because none of them feel true anymore, even the ones where I'm smiling, especially those. There's a box under the bed with old letters, most of them unsigned. Postcards from places I've never been sent by people who had just enough thought to include me, but not enough to follow up. I keep them anyway, not for comfort, just for accuracy. At night I boil water in a pot because I haven't bought a kettle yet. The whistle always annoyed me. Now, I just listen for the soft rumble before the bubbles break. The cup I use has a faint crack running from the rim to the base, barely visible unless the light hits it sideways. It doesn't leak. I drink from the opposite side. The notebook on my desk only has a few pages filled. I don't write every day, only when a sentence arrives already half-formed. This week I wrote I no longer belong where I tried to matter, and that's not shameful anymore. I didn't cross it out. The grocery store downstairs has 3 aisles and fluorescent lights that hum too loud. I carry a canvas bag with one broken strap. I still use it. It holds what I need. No one calls my name here. No one calls at all. The silence isn't heavy. It doesn't hang. It just stands beside me, breathing when I forget to. The doorman downstairs asked once if I wanted my name on the directory. I told him no. He nodded, didn't ask again. There's a cafe around the corner. Small, 2 tables inside, one outside facing a brick wall. I sit there sometimes. The waitress never gets my order wrong. She doesn't ask about my plans. One afternoon, a couple sat nearby. She laughed too loud. He corrected her story halfway through. She paused, then finished anyway. I didn't turn around. I wrote a list that day. Dish soap. New socks. Basil fertilizer. Quiet! That belongs to me. I forgot the socks. I didn't mind. I walk to the park sometimes, though I never sit. Just pass through. The benches are always taken by people who look like they're waiting for something. I'm not. Once I passed a woman pushing a stroller. The baby was asleep, one sock off, toes curled. She noticed, smiled at no one, and didn't stop walking. I wrote that down too. My old email account still exists. I check it rarely. Most messages go unanswered. The last one from Mom said, "It's really time to move on from this phase. Families disagree. That doesn't mean you vanish." There was no signature. No question. I didn't reply. Lila sent one too. "I heard you're living above a liquor store. I assume that's temporary." I stared at it longer than necessary, then archived it. The keys to the house are still in my drawer, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. I haven't thrown them out, not out of sentiment, just inertia. They don't open anything anymore. I drink more water now. No one reminds me. No one forgets. There's a chair by the window. Second hand. The fabric frays slightly near the arms. I sit there some evenings just watching how the light shifts across the floorboards. It doesn't rush. It moves without asking to be noticed. That feels right. I don't listen to music, not because I dislike it, but because the silence isn't something I need to cover. When I speak out loud now, it's usually to myself. Small things. Turn the burner off. You don't need that today. Hold the door. I speak like someone who's learning the shape of her own voice again. The apartment smells like nothing in particular. Sometimes basil, sometimes paper, never perfume. I used to think survival was a matter of endurance, that if I stayed I could carve space with presence alone. But here I've begun to wonder if survival might also be softness, not the kind you mold for others, but the kind that lets you breathe again. And for the first time, I don't feel like I need to explain that to anyone. Some voices don't change no matter how far away you hold the phone. The screen lit up with her name. I let it ring twice before answering. She didn't pause to ask how I was, or if I had time. Family photo this Sunday. It would look better if you were in it. Her tone was crisp, like she was reading a grocery list out loud. I didn't say anything. She continued. Try not to wear anything that draws attention. The line went quiet before I heard the click. I set the phone down without turning off the call. Eventually, it disconnected itself. The radiator ticked behind me 2 short clicks, and one long one as it always did before it settled. I picked up my mug. The tea had gone cold. I drank it anyway. Later that day, Nora sent a message. Lila's trying to get you in the article. Something about balance. They want our full family image, nothing messy. I didn't reply. I scrolled back to see if I had missed something. I hadn't. 3 days later, an email arrived. No greeting, no warmth, just a subject line, documents needed, farm transfer finalization. The PDF attachment was neatly formatted. There were blanks for my signature initials date. It wasn't a request. The note beneath it read, "This needs your signature to keep the ownership clean. It benefits everyone." No please, no explanation. I printed it out and left it beside the sink. The paper curled slightly near the corner where steam had risen from the dishwater. I didn't smooth it. I used to think signatures meant agreement. That to sign was to accept. Now I understood they could also be silence, or absence, or obligation. They weren't asking me to return, just to fill the space shaped like my name. The next day, a small envelope arrived by mail. No return address. Inside was a clipped newspaper article, legacy farms and the families that keep them alive. A photo showed the main house. The white porch railings, the freshly painted fence. Lila stood in the center, one hand on Mom's shoulder, Charles beside her. In the corner, faint and slightly out of frame, was the edge of the wooden swing I'd repaired the summer after high school. They had replaced the seat, but the chains were still mine. I turned the page over. Nothing written on the back, just newsprint. I left it on the table and opened the window. The wind carried it to the floor. When I was a child, I once got lost in the grocery store. I wandered down the cleaning aisle, stopped in front of the sponges. When I finally found Mom again, she looked at me without panic. "You have to pay attention. I can't always keep track of you." She didn't ask if I was scared. That sentence had stayed with me. Not cruel, just instructional, like a label warning not to overfill the container. I've learned to listen for repetition. Different days, same rhythm. You were never really part of the business. It's easier when we don't make things dramatic. This isn't personal, it's just logistics. I kept a folder in my drawer labeled Family Papers. Inside were old tax returns, emergency contacts, insurance details. I added the unsigned farm form to the stack. The folder had started to bulge. I thought about shredding it. I didn't. There's a certain weight in knowing what's been asked of you without anyone ever saying the words. When I was 23, Dad once pulled me aside during a fundraiser. "You understand the value of discretion. That's rare." He didn't mean it as praise. It was more like a statement of assignment. I nodded then. I didn't now. Mom sent another message 2 days before Sunday. Please don't arrive late if you're coming. The photographer is on a schedule. No question. No assumption that I might not. She didn't need me present, just punctual. I took out the dress shirt I used to wear to family dinners. The collar was slightly stiff, the cuffs still bearing the faint crease of old starch. I hung it on the back of the door. It stayed there for 3 days. I didn't touch it again. On Saturday night, Nora left a voice message. You don't owe them symmetry or closure. Just decide what you need. I listened once, then deleted it. I sat at the kitchen table and lit the single candle I kept in the drawer. The wax had faded to a dull grey. It burned unevenly, one side faster than the other. The flame leaned left. I placed the unsigned documents in a folder, sealed it, and left it on the desk. No return envelope. No instructions. If they needed something from me, they could learn how to ask. I once believed that if I disappeared, they would come looking not for help, but for me. Now I knew better. They hadn't returned to repair what was broken. They had come only to borrow my outline to make the picture look balanced. But I'm not a placeholder anymore, and I won't stand still just to make them seem whole. I no longer measure my worth by the space I'm allowed to occupy. The barista on 7th remembers my name. Just my name, nothing more. He doesn't ask how I'm doing, doesn't ask if I'm visiting, or if I'm local. He just glances up, nods once. One black, almond croissant. For here, right, he remembers. Not because I'm important, because I've been consistent. I sit by the window, third table from the door. The corner is slightly chipped. The napkin dispenser wobbles. No one's ever fixed it. I press a sugar packet under the metal to keep it still. They don't play music in this place. The hum comes from the espresso machine and the small conversations I don't belong to. I used to try to listen in. Now I let them pass. At work, my desk is in the back, nearest to the file cabinet and farthest from the coffee machine. The chair squeaks when I shift, so I don't shift often. I catalogue sample data, update logs, double-check reports. The names above mine on the project reports rotate, but mine is always the same line, 6 bottom margin. It doesn't bother me. The badge on my lanyard says, Grace Whitmore. Not Mrs., not anything else. That too feels enough. I opened a savings account last month. No cosigner. No emergency contact I felt safe listing, just me. The banker paused at the empty field. I didn't explain. I'm building something steady, I offered. He smiled, like that meant I was doing well. I didn't correct him. The apartment still smells like paper and basil, and something faintly citrus from the floor cleaner I've been rationing. I like how the scent doesn't cling. I keep a small notepad on the kitchen counter. Today's list. Buy milk. Clean filter. Fix corner of rug. Keep going. The rug's corner still lifts slightly when I walk past. I haven't taped it. There's something comforting about its insistence. Lila texted again. It would mean something if you showed up for once. Just for Mom. The message came through during lunch. I was slicing an orange, the kind with dark red flesh and rind that smells like earth. I didn't stop slicing. She sent another an hour later. You're not punishing us. You're just making things harder. The orange was sour. I folded the peels neatly into a napkin and pressed them to the bottom of the trash bin. At the corner bookstore, I found a second-hand copy of a gardening journal. No photos. Just notes in pencil from someone named L.M. The handwriting reminded me of Dad's in his earlier years, tight loops slightly slanted left. I bought it for $5. The receipt is still tucked inside. I write in the margins sometimes. Not responses, just observations. Page 14. Beets should be rotated. Soil remembers too much otherwise. I wrote under it. So do people. The coat I wear has a button missing on the left cuff. It doesn't affect anything. I could fix it. I haven't. Mom used to say, if you're going to walk through the world quietly, at least look like you belong in it. Then she'd adjust my sleeves, straighten my collar, pull my hair back a little too tightly. You're plain, she once told me in the car, matter of fact. But plain can be refined if you put in the work. I nodded. I was 13. Now I let the wind pull my hair into uneven parts. I don't carry a compact mirror. If something's out of place, it stays that way. I keep a spreadsheet of expenses. Rent, groceries, lab coats, bus pass. I enter the numbers once a week, Sunday evenings. There are no shared columns, no notes labeled Mom or Lila. The math always comes out clean. The landlord asked last week if I was renewing. I nodded, signed the lease. He didn't ask if I was staying alone. You're easy, he said. Quiet tenant. People use that word like it's praise. Quiet. It used to make me feel invisible. Now it feels like a border. I get to draw myself. I haven't updated my emergency contact on any official form. I use my work phone number and cross my fingers. No one calls it. The basil plant leans sharply now, one side stronger than the other. I trimmed it this morning. The scent stayed on my fingertips. I didn't wash it off right away. I still don't keep family photographs. There's no need to prove who I came from. There's a mirror above the sink. I don't avoid it, but I don't search it either. I pass by, catch glimpses, collarbones, wrist bones, jaw. The body of someone who no longer flinches at silence. I haven't spoken to Mom in 2 months, not since she sent the voicemail. Your absence is louder than anything you ever said. She meant it as a warning, but I think of it now as a milestone. I sleep on one side of the bed, not because I'm waiting for anyone, just habit, just enough. At the bottom of my drawer is a folder marked legal. Inside are the papers I never signed, the farm, the image rights, the fund. I keep them flat, untouched, not because I plan to use them, but because I want to remember that not signing is also a signature. I am not smaller than the things I refused, and I no longer need anyone else's frame to be whole. There are gestures that don't require witnesses to become real. I didn't bring much with me, just the envelope and the document folded twice along the same crease, until the paper remembered where it was meant to break. I carried it flat in my bag, tucked between a utility bill and a pack of mints I never opened. Dean Abbott's office still smelled faintly like copier paper and aftershave. The blinds were drawn too tight, letting in thin stripes of light across the desk. I didn't ask him to open them. He gestured for me to sit without speaking. The silence was not unfamiliar. We'd exchanged this kind of quiet before, when the estate papers were drafted, when the farm's holdings were reviewed, when my name had been reduced to a clerical complication. I placed the file on the table. I'm here to surrender all association. Name, title, claims implied or inherited. He paused, not out of surprise, just confirmation. His fingers tapped the cover once lightly. You understand this removes you completely from the Whitmore estate. I do. You won't be entitled to future distributions, land access, or residual holdings. Any record of your name in active business will be legally archived. I'm aware. He looked at me for longer than the question required. There was a hesitation in his eyes, not for me, but for the part of him that was still playing by their rules. He opened the folder and laid the papers out with methodical care. The signature line was blank. The ink in his pen was fresh, the kind reserved for finalities. I uncapped mine. The pen was from the bookstore downtown. Cheap, slightly scratchy, the kind that didn't pretend to be elegant. I preferred that now. I signed. One clean line, no flourish. No middle initial. Just the name they had once used for school forms, tax returns, and announcements I was never part of. He nodded, one. There's no turning back after this. There hasn't been a path back for a long time. He closed the folder. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope sealed unmarked, thick, with the weight of its simplicity. I placed it beside the contract. This is for my mother and Lila. You may send it with the legal packet. I don't require a reply. He didn't reach for it immediately. Maybe he expected more. A speech, a plea, an unraveling. None came. I stood. Outside, the wind caught the lapel of my coat and held it open for a few seconds before letting go. I didn't fix it. I walked slowly, not because I doubted the decision, but because some endings should be felt in full. The post office was 3 blocks away. The sun moved behind the clouds just long enough to remind me it had been there. The envelope inside the larger package contained one line printed in my own hand. I am no longer of the Whitmore family, not in name, not in need. No anger, no ornament, just a boundary drawn in ink, not emotion. When I was 14, I remember Lila getting into trouble at school, something about a library book that had gone missing. I was in the kitchen when Mom turned to me and said, "If you know anything, it's your responsibility to protect her." That's what quiet girls do. They carry the things louder ones break. I carried that longer than I should have. I passed a hardware store on the way home. A broom. Awkwardly near the window, tied with a red ribbon that had faded to pink. The knot reminded me of the kind Mom used to tie on holiday napkins, tight, symmetrical, unforgiving. I didn't stop walking. Back in my apartment, I set the signed documents in the bottom drawer of my desk. Not out of sentiment, just to know where they were, should memory ever need proof. I brewed tea and let it steep longer than usual. The water cooled into something too weak to name, but I drank it anyway. The basil plant had begun to lean again, not from thirst, just growth. I didn't correct it this time. Letting it lean was a kind of trust. The envelope would reach them by Monday. By then, the estate files would be archived, the name scratched from lists, and the story rewritten without me. They would explain it, I'm sure privately, in the kind of tones they reserved for inconvenience. She chose to leave. She never really fit. She made it difficult to include her. All of it might even sound true, said aloud enough. But the line I wrote was still the truest thing I had ever signed. They asked for my silence long ago. Now I've given them its full weight, sealed, notarized, and unreturnable. And I no longer have to explain why I'm not coming back. I never thought quiet would feel this solid. The linen curtain filters the light just enough to soften its edge. I chose the fabric myself. No one suggested it. I didn't ask if it matched the walls. It hangs unevenly by less than half an inch, and I've decided not to fix it. The armchair still creaks when I sit down. Not loudly, just enough to say, I'm here. The sound has become a kind of greeting. I don't cushion it. I don't replace it. Some things are allowed to remain exactly what they are. The notebook on the table is nearly full. I don't write in it daily, only when a line insists. Today I flipped back to a page from August, a single sentence. No one can take what you've already laid down. I don't remember writing it. I know it's mine. The tea leaves come from a tin I bought at a sidewalk stand. The labels begun to curl, the ink fading into something unreadable. I measure them by instinct now, not by spoon. The kettle doesn't whistle. It clicks once, barely audible. I like that about it. There's no music. Just the occasional groan of wood, the brush of wind against the glass. I've stopped filling the space with sound. Letting silence be itself has become a way of listening. There's a letter in the bottom drawer of my desk. Not recent. Lila wrote it when we were teenagers, folded it into a book I hadn't opened in months. A short apology for something small, a paper I'd written, a contest I'd entered, something she took and ruined without meaning to. I kept the letter for years, not because I believed in the apology, but because I needed proof it once existed. Today I placed it back in its envelope, tied it with string, and laid it in the wooden box under the shelf. Not to save it, not to revisit it, just to acknowledge it's no longer something I reach for. I pour tea slowly. The steam curls once then dissipates. I don't sweeten it. I don't watch the clock. Some mornings I drink it too hot. Others it cools before I remember it. I've stopped trying to time things just right. The taste is neither sharp nor soft. It doesn't insist on being noticed. It simply is. I once believed that clarity would come with fanfare, that freedom would arrive like a clean break. But this feels more like a quiet unfolding, like a fist unclenching beneath skin. No spectacle, no audience, just air returning to a room that had been held too tightly. There's a towel on the rack with a small bleach stain in one corner. I use it anyway. I've grown used to imperfect fabric. I've grown used to choosing what stays not based on appearance but presence. No one checks in anymore. The messages stopped weeks ago. Lila's last one ended without punctuation. Just remember who helped you when you needed quiet. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to clarify. Sometimes I wonder if she remembers what she took. But then I remember that absence isn't always theft. Sometimes it's choice. Repeated, reworded, and finally rewritten as truth. There's a chipped bowl I keep near the sink. I use it often. I like how it holds shape without needing to be whole. The crack hasn't widened. It just lives there now, visible, unapologetic. I folded my laundry this morning without rushing. Each shirt laid flat, each edge lined up with care, not urgency. I don't color code. I don't hide the wear. The socks don't match. That used to bother me. It doesn't anymore. The floor creaks in the same two places. I know where they are. I step on them anyway. Sometimes I like the sound. It reminds me that stillness doesn't mean absence. I've stopped telling myself that beginnings require clean pages. This morning I wrote on the back of an old receipt, just a line, being unseen is not the same as being unmade. I tore it out, taped it to the fridge. I water the plant every 3 days. It doesn't bloom. It doesn't wilt. It leans slightly west toward the weaker light. It hasn't outgrown the pot, but it hasn't stopped trying. I leave the window cracked even when it rains. I like the scent of wet air. It carries nothing. It asks nothing. There is no plan for tomorrow. Just a mug, a page, a lamp that flickers occasionally when the power hums too loud. I don't fix it. I just wait for it to return. No one knows I'm here. Not because I'm hiding, because I no longer need to be found. I am still Grace. Not Grace from somewhere, not Grace attached to anything, just Grace. I don't wear a ring. I don't carry keys that open anyone else's door. I have no passwords to family accounts. No drawer full of what-ifs. I don't speak to prove I exist. I am a woman in a room with a creaking chair, a quiet window, and tea gone warm. And for the first time, nothing is missing. Not even me.